I'm going to wait like 3-4 minutes just because I know people sometimes have a hard time connecting. They didn't download Zoom. Some people in the last class went to the classroom, was like, why is no one here? Then they read their emails and they were like, oh, okay, and joined. So I'm just going to wait 3 or 4 minutes. We got Dakota. Okay. So first of all, guys, thank you for this. I tried to get a substitute because I know Zoom sucks, but everybody either that taught this class either also has COVID or just their schedules conflicted. So I could not get a sub. So this is our meeting. So thank you, first of all, for joining via Zoom. I know it really sucks. Thanksgiving was brutal, Dakota, a lot of COVID. Yeah, it's just like coming back hard. It's my first time. I went almost 3 years without COVID. Got this, but I'm boosted, so it's not that bad. Thursday depends whether or not we have class in person on Thursday, or if we have class via Zoom on Thursday. All depends on how I test either tonight or tomorrow. So I think I should be okay because I was tested negative on Thanksgiving. So, I mean, I tested positive on Thanksgiving. So I have to test again. If it is negative, I'll see you in class. And I really hope it's negative because it's one of my favorite classes. It's visual effects. And that's when I really ruin movies for you. And if it's not, then it'll have to be over Zoom, which sucks. But I will definitely let you know as soon as I know. So that's about Thursday. Today is about computer animation. A couple of things. When I share my screen, there's so many things going on that I often don't see the chat. The chat gets hidden under boxes. So you can absolutely write in the chat, but if you don't hear me address it, or at least say, hey, I see your chat, just unmute yourself and be like, check the chat. Sometimes there's a big lag, like I'll hit share screen and I'll start talking about the thing that's on the screen and people are like, we can't see anything on the screen. We have no idea what you're talking about. If that happens, just say like, hey, you're not sharing the screen. Sometimes I screw up. Sometimes the computer just lags. All right. If we have time at the end, I'm not sure we will, I'll go over some questions about, oh, no, not yet. But, oh, the other thing, extra credit will go up tonight. So, everybody ready? We good? All right.
Yes.
Let's do this. So, like I said, today we are talking about computer animation. Can everybody see the screen? That's my first question. Oh,
yes.
Second question. How many people are on a phone? It's absolutely okay if you are.
I'm on a phone.
Okay. If you can't see something because your screen is small, just unmute and be like, Zoom, and I'll know to zoom in, okay? All right. Meanwhile, I'm going to try to make everything as big as we can. So animation has just like, computer animation is just like cell animation, stop motion animation, live action, in that it has pre-production, production, and post-production. Actually, I'm going to turn that up. And in fact, computer animation has some real similarities to, say, puppet animation. Like, remember how we looked at Fantastic Mr. Fox? What did they have to do in Fantastic Mr. Fox? Well, first they had to build the set so that there was a place where this could happen. So they had to build all the sets for all the different scenes and locations. They had to build the characters, the actual puppets that do that. They had to build all the props. So when Mr. Fox is eating, they had to build the whatever it was he was eating. The clothing, all the stuff that is in there. And they had to figure out the shots all there. That's the same exact thing as computer animation. You have to build those sets just like with stop motion. You have to build those puppets just like with stop motion. You have to build all the props just like with stop motion. The thing is, you're building them inside the computer. You're using the software to do that. So when we talk about software, I'm not going to show you how to use the software, but know that two big pieces of software that are used are Maya and Blender. I'm going to show you this one creature creation, and a guy taught himself how to use Blender because Blender is free. Now, there's a lot more 3D animation software out there. There's tons, but two very, very popular ones are Maya and Blender, and Blender is free. So just to let you know that if you want to get into that kind of world. So let's first watch a computer animation thing. This film isn't like the best computer animated film you've ever seen, but I have some behind the scenes material from it, which is why I'm using it. Okay. So turn video sound. There we go. All right, so it's not the best short film I've ever seen. It's cute, but it still is a surprising amount of work in all the things. And that was a really, I use it because it's simple. It's simple. There's not a whole lot of props, not a whole lot of set design, not a whole lot of set decoration. I mean, it's one location, basically. So let's go through the pre-production and production part of it. I'm not going to go into the post-production part because the post-production is exactly like the post-production with live action and physical animation. And we're going over that I'm going to introduce that in our next class. But let's go. All right. So this is pretty simple. Oh yeah, I have to close that. Wait, so you guys can see it. So this should look all pretty familiar because it's basically the beginning part is the same as with live action and with cell. You got to start with a good story, and you've got to you make that story into a script. And of course, you do the shooting script, and you do your shot list, and then you do your, basically that's it. Now, what's different or not, because we did use this in Batman 2, is the concept art. And we did this with Snow White as well, and Fantastic Mr. Fox. We need concept art. We need to have an idea of before we start creating these things, we need to all agree on what to create. So just like with, oh wow, I'm using the wrong thing. Just like with Snow White and Batman and all of those things, we use concept art. And this was the original concept art for the movie you just saw. And you can tell she looks, I'll try to zoom in for folks on their phone, she looks a lot different in the concept art, and he looks a lot different in the concept art than wound up being in the film, but it's concept art. What are you going to do? Here's concept art about the character. Like this is what the caterpillar Silky was going to look like. More about how his outside, and we will come back to this, outside looked, what his inner skeletal structure would look like. You can see they made notes on his eyes. It says we want his eyelids to look very fat, and we want his eyelids to have a really elastic surface. Just like with Snow White, we do our expression sheets. So these were the expression sheets for Luna the Moth. And these are the expression sheets for, hang on, these are the expression sheets for the caterpillar. And then, just like with all our other things, we storyboard and animatic. I used to have the animatic for Luna, but I do not have it anymore. And in addition to the animatic art, animatic has to include, just like we did with whatchamacallit, with both cell animation as well as stop motion, is we did our walk cycle as part of our animatic. Because we need to know exactly how our character walks in addition to what they look like. So you might call the walk cycle as part of the concept art, but it has expression sheets just like the others. And all that. We also, one thing I didn't put in here that we do as part of this part is the script breakdown. And you need this script breakdown because you have to, just like with if you were doing Fantastic Mr. Fox, you need to know all of the stuff that you have to build, from the set, which is the location, to the props, to the characters, all of it. And I'm going to put etc. because there's so much more. But these are, before we get anywhere near developing, going 3D, we do all this 2D stuff. And yes, even the animatic is really two-dimensional before we get into it. So I'm going to show you basically the making of up to, I'll be showing this film in piecemeal as we go along. Not this one. But, and if you are into teaching yourself or learning how to do computer animation, there's a really good channel called Bloop. This is Bloop Animation. I don't think his stories are great, but his how-tos are wonderful. So I am going to 155. I want you to see the animatic.
This time using your 3D models.
Okay, so what he has done is his story. He's done his concept art. He's done his storyboards, and I want you to see basically his animatic. I thought that was at 155. Yeah, here we go. So here are his
and Spot's story. And
so you can see this is basically what you guys are going to have to do. It's our shot. You should be able to see what is happening just by looking at that. And now he's going to do his animatic from this.
Act better to a storyboard than a script. At this point, I tweak my story and make changes until I'm pleased with the boards and ready to move on to making an animatic. An animatic is the movie version of your storyboard. Storyboard is more like a comic book, and an animatic is like a movie. You bring all the boards into an editing program and edit them with the correct timing. Add some temporary music and sound effects, just enough to convey the different story beats. When you're done with that, you have the first version of your film ready to watch. As great as a storyboard is, an animatic really gives you the first glimpse of what your film is going to be like. Show it to people again, get some more feedback, tweak the boards, the timing, and the pacing until you are very happy with how the film works.
Okay, so I'm going to go back here, but basically that I'm going to show you, keep going back to this short film as you see the steps he takes. But the animatics are basically still two-dimensional. This is also where you would animate your walk cycle, or at least have the concept art for your walk cycle, know what you want them to look like. But this is all pre-production. Literally, we haven't even opened up our computer animation software yet at this point, because this is all the stuff we do ahead of time. But now, once we do, so let me stop there. Any questions on any of the pre-production stuff? And I think you can see it is pretty damn similar to our live action and our cell. Story, script, all the things you do to the script, the shooting script, the breakdown, the shot. So it's that, storyboards, animation, and of course the concept art, so you know what everything looks like. So this is when it becomes a lot less like live action, much less like cell animation, but a little bit like computer animation. So, I mean, a little more like stop motion animation. So, remember I said how we do breakdown sheets for animation because it's really important to know all the things we have to build. Every single thing on that breakdown sheet we have to build, just like if we were doing Fantastic Mr. Fox. So we have to build our location. We have to build our characters. We have to build our extras. We have to build our wardrobe, our vehicles, our animals, our set dressing, our props, all of it. We even have to build sometimes our special effects. So that process, all of those things that we need to build, those are called your assets. And this process is called asset building. Share my screen again. So asset building starts, these are all the things that are part of production. And the first two that we are going to look at are modeling and rigging. So I showed you all the concept art that we did as part of pre-production. Now we have to make these actual beings, and that is called asset building. So it's taking that concept art that we did, whether it's for our characters or for our props or for our sets, we take that concept art and we start to make it into 3D models. But listen closely when I say 3D models, because these 3D models require a lot of steps that I think people forget. So, and remember, building modeling means assets. I just want you to remember that's set, that's props, that's characters, that's everything. Set decoration, FX, all that stuff. They all need to be built. And the first step in building is modeling. So there are people who specialize only in modeling. There are people who do modeling plus some other stuff. But modeling is a specific skill, and you take the 2D concept and you turn it into, I don't want to say sculpted puppets, I want to say sculpted statues. Because puppet implies that you can move this thing, and that's not true. Now, this is what a model looks like. People on phones, is this big enough for you? Trying to keep it reasonable size. All right, so take a look at this little guy here. This is the caterpillar in Luna that we just watched, okay? And modeling is making him. Now, I want you to imagine, I'm going to make a whiteboard here for a second. All right, so the process of modeling. So it's making our 2D asset 3D. Imagine, if you will, if we had a bunch of Legos and I'm going to make a human being out of that Legos. So here's one Lego. Here's another Lego. Here's, oh, I don't know, another Lego. Another Lego. Or French fries, whatever. I'm trying to make them look like Legos. Okay. Each of these things, I have here 6 Legos to make a human being. This is kind of like making a model in computer animation. Instead of Legos, though, we call them polygons. And those are the building blocks of our assets. For our models, we're building polygons. Now, in my human model here, I only have 6 polygons. And he looks pretty crap, right? There's no elbows, there's no hand, there's no fingers, no finger joints, anything like that. So generally, the more polygons I have, the more subtle and nuanced and basically realistic I can make it. I just got a notification. Could you guys see the whiteboard this whole time when I was drawing?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm on a computer, so.
Okay, I'm getting weird pop-ups that are just saying like.
It's fine on the phone.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Yeah.
So the more polygons you have, the more realistic and the more you can move your character. So for instance, I go back to this guy. Right here in this view, each one of these things, that's one polygon. So I've just highlighted 3 polygons, like 3 Legos. So look at just how many polygons are right here, how many polygons that is. So here's a side view of the model. Whoops, like that. You can see all these polygons. So we have 2 kinds of models. And I mean, we have models and there can be considered low poly or high poly. And the low and high just refers to how many polygons that there are. So this is a dog, obviously. And you can see these are big hunks of polygons, right? These are considered low poly. This one has 1,570 polygons. This one's even lower, 576 polygons. So you can see these are huge and it's not very realistic, but sometimes that's okay. It's enough. As opposed to a dog like this, which has, I think, 250,000 polygons. How many? It has, no, 24,000 polygons. And when we're talking about making these polygons, there are a bunch of different ways you can make them. Now, the first way is you just open up your software and start building Lego on top of Lego on top of Lego until you have a structure. So that's one way, just start building. The second way, just say, where am I? All right, not there. The second way is you will trace, you'll use your concept art, and I'm going to show you what this looks like in a second. And it's what this guy did. This is the guy that taught himself Blender. So this is his 2D art, this stuff right here. Obviously, you can tell. And he's just going into Blender, and this is a time lapse, so it looks very fast. And he's building his polygons. I know those look like 2D, but I will play it until he changes the view so you can see that these polygons are 3D. And by the time this guy is done making his structure, so you can see it's 3D there, right? Shaping his polygons and adding polygons and all that, he has 500,000 polygons by the time this thing is done. And I will link to this on, we go back to various stages in here, and I will link to this on our website if anybody wants to watch the full thing. But even in time lapse, it's still almost 19 minutes long. So back to this. So that's our second way. One is just to open up this software and start building. 2 is to scan in your artwork and use it as a background to start building your actual 3D model on. The third way is to buy it. And you can go to a place like, I'll show you, CG Trader. And I just put in dogs, right? And you can see these dogs are pretty reasonably priced. Say I want a low poly dog. Well, you can see this guy is pretty low poly. Here, our polygraph. We'll get into what that is later. And this is, we can see over here, there are 344,000 and it's still considered low poly. And you can have it for less than $5. And we can also go to high poly stuff. Hang on. And look for any of, let's look at this guy right there. I mean, that looks pretty great. And 3,000, but more vertices. So you can buy them. This one's 18. So you also, the third way to do it is to buy it. The fourth way is to use a 3D scanner. Basically, this is a really cheap one, but you walk around the human being or your model, whatever it is. So say this is your model. You take this thing and walk around the person while recording it. And of course, you have to do this way as well. There are very, very good ones, and then there are pretty cheap ones. In fact, you can probably go online and find a DIY 3D scanner. I know you can do it with a DSLR. There are some hacks to make a 3D scanner out of your iPhone. But basically, instead of drawing the thing you want, you have a 3D thing. If I wanted to, I don't know, animate this Coke can, I could take my 3D scanner, scan it, and that will go into the computer and it will build that. Any question on polygons or anything that I've said so far? All right. Because what you need to know is by the time we're done with all those polygons, what I've got is basically a statue. There's nothing I can do with that except move it the same way I'm moving this here. There's like nothing I can do. If it's a human being, and I can use all the polygons in the world, I can use 10 million polygons, but it's still going to be a static structure because it's only polygons. Erica, you have a question.
So by that, you mean like it can't make facial expressions yet or bend an arm. It can just
can't exactly.
Okay, thank you.
It's almost like you build it out of Legos, just like millions of Legos, so you can make it look really real. But there's still nothing you can do with it. Because the next step is where we put basically the guts inside of that model. Think of it as putting the bones, the muscles, and the tendons and the ligaments inside of your model so that we can make it move. Now, the thing is, you don't need to do that to everything, right? Because we're building our assets, and our assets are everything from props, sets, set decoration, the whole thing. Well, in Luna, for instance, one of the big pieces of set decoration was that light, that street light. Well, that street light doesn't move. I don't need to make it move. So basically, I model it, and that's all that needs to happen to that for a while until we get to another step. But for any of our assets that do have to move, there are two ways to make something move. The first way, the way that is for characters and things like that, 99% of our stuff, it's called rigging. And just like there are modelers who do, it's their specific job to model, there are people whose jobs are riggers. And that's what they do. They rig things. This is rigging. So if you can see this, I'm going to zoom in for our phone folks. You can see right there that there are a bunch of different ways. What your rigging looks like will change depending on what software you are using. So right here, you can see that this is rigging for this model of a man. And it's not a hell of a lot of rigging. Like if we look down at his foot here, you can see he only has basically one bone for his entire foot, which means his bone can move up and his foot can move up and down, but it's not like he can wriggle his toes. I don't even know how many bones are in our hands and tendons are in our hands, but it's like some ridiculous amount, like 140 just in our hand. And this guy has like 10 bones in his entire body. This is what it might look like in some software. This is what it looks like in other software. Even though the way this guy looks isn't intuitive, both of this is the same thing. Both of this is rigging. Putting those inside structure into our model so that we can manipulate it. Does that make sense to folks? Okay.
Yes.
So I'm going to show you modeling and rigging in two things. One, I'm going to go back to our bloop animation guy. Come on. And show you the modeling and rigging. And then, whoops, we got another person. All right. And then I'll show it to you in our other one. So modeling is at 2:30.
Basically creating all the digital.
So he's just about to slam it, basically creating all the digital. So this, he's going to go through the two things, modeling and rigging, and then I'll show you another modeling and rigging.
Then it's time to get into 3D. We start with modeling, basically creating all the digital models for the film. The environments, the sets, the props, and of course the characters. We use the concept art and model sheets we created earlier and model based on them.
So basically he's saying we create the models out of our polygons based on our concept.
Models, when first created, can't really do much. We can place them in our scenes, but they can move until we rig them. And that's our next step, rigging. When we talk about rigging a model, we mean creating some kind of a digital skeleton with different controls to move it around. Before we rig our models, they were like statues. But now they are more like action figures, only with much more nuanced motions.
So even though that doesn't look like the same thing that with the bones, it is actually the same thing. And I want to show you, I will be also going back to this one quite a lot. So you saw he was scanning in and he was modeling. I just want to show you where I'm going to play this, stop at a few different places so you can see how much he is continuing. The good thing about this character, and one really fantastic thing, is when you're building that, for instance, he hasn't put the arms on yet. He is going to create the arms. After he creates one arm, he can just select it, hit copy and paste, and duplicate that arm and just flip it around and put it on this side. So that is one very handy shortcut that computer animation does allow you to do. And now I'm going to scan ahead to where he starts rigging. Right here. This is finalizing some stuff. And here we go. This looks more like what I showed you in the picture, but you can see he's going to move the jaw now, but to move the jaw, he needs to put a joint right here. He's putting stuff inside the tail, and for the first time, we'll be able to move the tail. He curls the tail. And he just made 5 of those, 1 for each toe. So obviously, the more joints you have in there, the more subtle the movement is going to be, and the more parts of that creature will be able to move. And now you can see how he moves. So that is modeling and rigging. Does anyone have any questions on modeling or rigging? All right. Because, excuse me, share screen again. Come on, open up. Open up, there we go. Now we have our characters, and somewhere along here, we do our walk cycle, right? To explore how the character walks, makes gestures, he's rigged. And I can show you what this looks like. And you can see it's just a bouncy, it's a walk cycle, just to show you how we do it. Now we do something called pre-visualization. So we have made, just as a reminder, we have made all of our assets. So we've made our locations. We've made our props. Come on. Like this is the leaf prop. We've made any special effects. We've made our set design, all that. The things that we needed to animate, we have rigged them. So we're all good. Now we do the pre-visualization. Everything is pretty low resolution right now. And we're not animating. I want you to know that pre-visualization really happens before we get into animating. Pre-visualization is us taking our assets, so taking our props, taking our set decoration, taking our cast members, taking our extras, and doing what we call blocking them. Like, where is our character going to start and where are they going to move to? Where is the camera going? What angle? Is the camera moving? You can think of it kind of like a tech rehearsal if you've ever done theater. We're not acting, we're not doing anything really difficult. We're literally marking out like, okay, character A is going to go from there to, he's going to walk over here, and then a guy's going to walk behind him. And okay, we need to figure out the timing of that. Our camera, do we want our camera, we said we wanted a low angle medium. Well, do we want it over here looking this way, or do we want it over here slightly different? And then if the camera moves, we have to do the moving, we have to simulate the moving of the camera in the computer. So we lay everything out and move everything around and look at it to make sure everything works before we start actually animating. For instance, what if you have your character needs, this would be where you'd find out something like if you were really not very good or you made a big mistake at the beginning. Say your character has to jump over a log, but oh my God, your character, you didn't rig the character so that it could jump. And if you didn't notice that beforehand, well, you would definitely notice it during the pre-visualization. So the pre-visualization is the last chance you get to make any sort of story changes or blocking changes. When I say blocking, like the position of the things within the frame on the set. Because once we start animating, it gets very, very time consuming and tedious, and making big changes, especially to something like the story, at that point is a lot of work. So this is kind of like an ugly, unfinished version of your characters moving around in space. They might not be moving their individual parts. They might not be using the rigging, but you're at least seeing where they move within the set, where the camera moves within the set. and how all the timing works out. So I will show you the previs of this guy.
Making sure the story works, and that is creating a previs or a pre-visualization. This is the next incarnation of our animatic, this time using your 3D models. We set up all the shots in the 3D program with all.
So what I want you to look at is you'll see he does actually make this character's movement is just, he changes it a little bit. It's not animated really. Because you can see this is not fluid motion, but you can also see like this is really ugly. There's no real lighting applied to it. There's no surface textures. It's a very, very rough draft.
The final camera angles in motion.
So there's a line of characters here, and he wants to make sure that this camera can dolly alongside them.
All the shots in the 3D program with all the final camera angles in motion, and create very basic animation for the characters, just enough to convey the action they're supposed to be.
So for instance, there is nothing moving when we see this actual shot in the final film, there's movement on this character's face. He scowls, but we haven't done any of that animation yet. So that's why this is a pre.
Just enough to convey the action they're supposed to be doing. Then we bring all of these shots to the editing program, just like we did with the animatic, and we now have a previs version of our film with the correct 3D models and camera motion. This is really the last step you can still make changes in, because animation takes a very long time and it will be a huge waste if we had to make story changes after that. So again, I show it to more people, get some more feedback, and make sure I'm completely happy with the film. And now.
Okay. Does anybody have any question on modeling, rigging, asset building, or previs? If I say asset building, you guys all know what I mean in terms of computer animation. Okay. Now, as you saw in that previs, it's ugly. Those pigs don't look like pigs. Everything is just flat, and it doesn't look like there's any lighting. All previs, no matter what, all previs pretty much look like that. But now there's two things that we now have to do. And one is called rigging. Animating. And I'm not going to go into how to animate, because basically now we're just getting into how to use the software, and that's not what this class is about. It is still based pretty much on the frames per second thing, except you don't have to redraw each thing. You're moving a character in space. But that's all I'm going to talk about for animation, because the methods change depending on which piece of software you're using. So, but basically animating is making our characters, using our characters' rigging to make the motions that need to be made. And we work shot by shot. Literally, we work one shot at a time, and then we're like, done with shot one, let's start shot two. Boom, done with shot two, let's start shot three. So it's literally like shooting a film, live action film, the way it's like, okay, we need to do shot 32 and shot 72 today. Let's do those. So, and just like with live action, if you hire Robert De Niro, you use Robert De Niro in one scene, you use him in the next scene. And once you build your character, once you build your asset, you can use that asset in any scene you want, whether that asset is a street lamp that doesn't have to move, or it's a moth that does move. So that's animation. But there's kind of animation that doesn't involve rigging. What would you do, for instance? Say we want to make an animated movie about our classroom in Murray 208. So in Murray, we built our assets. So we built the classroom, we built the set, and then we built the set decoration. So we built the chairs, models of the chairs. We made models of the projector, the model of the computer in the corner, the models of the little coat racks, models of the electrical plugs, model of the chalkboard, model of the chalk, all of that stuff. And then we made models of each of you students. And then we rigged the students. We don't have to rig any of those previous assets because that chalkboard is not like moving independently. So I made the students, and then I animate you guys coming in with all the props that we made. Easy. I can do all that with rigging. I mean, not easy. It's a lot of work and it's hard, but we can do that. Now, what happens if the scene calls for, there's a fire that starts out by the tables and smoke is coming in through the door. It's coming under the door and into our classroom. How do I animate smoke? Like, I can't put bones inside smoke and make it look like smoke. What if it was water? How do I make water look like water? I can't put bones in water. So for some things that we can't rig, we use something called dynamic simulation. You do not need to know these equations. I only used them as examples because, and I should add the word dynamic up here. If you're in the computer animation world and you're talking about simulations, they'll know you mean dynamic simulations, but there are Civil War simulations too. So dynamic simulation. And what dynamic simulation is that software designers have made pieces of software that follow mathematical models of the real world, like the laws of gravity, the laws of motion, laws of entropy. And they have figured them out and put them all into mathematical models that then allow us to use these models and sort of just choose what we want. So let me show you this in action. Okay, so this is an old piece. This is old software, like really old, like 10 years old, but it has what I like to see. So say we want an explosion to go off somewhere else in Murray and fire and smoke come under our door. So this is still an asset. We're creating this asset, but you can see that they already have created like explosion. And if you look over here, you can see other things they have. They have water and lights and rain. And basically, I'm simplifying this very, very much, but they give you options like, how dense do you want your flame to be? This is pretty dense and it looks like it's an explosion, but look at how dense this smoke is, right? It's really dark, it's really dense, it's really concentrated. Well, those are all things that you can choose via these sliders. Now, if I had a cigarette, obviously I wouldn't want the smoke looking like this. I would take down the smoke density and things like that. If it was really a windy day, I would add more turbulence, things like that. This is pretty opaque, like you can't see through that at all. If I wanted to make cigarette smoke, I would definitely bring down the transparency because I don't want to, cigarette smoke should not look that black. But this software allows us to manipulate basically laws of physics and get the look that we are looking for. So things like wind, snow, a lot of things that would be effects, right? There's no way you can rig a firework to make it look like this is snow, and it can give us, I mean, they call it particles, but you can see they talk about how the gravity, the direction, water is another thing that's very difficult to, impossible to rig. So this is where you would need to use dynamic simulation. And you can see it can get extremely complicated. It's way above anything I know how to do, which is why it's so wonderful that it exists. And in really well done CGI, characters will be a combination of a few things. They will be, so Woody, or no, I can't remember the character's name, but there's a, like a fuzzy clown toy thing that moves in one of the Toy Stories, like Toy Story 4. And for the movement, it's big movement like that, they use rigging, but it also has very ducky, that's the thing. It's a duck that's won at a prize at a carnival. But to make the feathers in the react to gravity perfectly, if he moved this way, they want to make sure the feathers move in that way, and you can't rig a feather. They use dynamic simulation. So it's a combo, usually something like, not like this kid was making, but like Toy Story and other type things. Dynamic simulation is almost always used it for details and difficult things like water, all of that. So when it comes to animation, there is rigging and animating the models, but there is also dynamic simulation for when you need it. That makes sense so far? We're all good on dynamic simulation?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because what we haven't done is make the stuff less ugly. Anybody here ever done any sort of sewing? Or seen someone do sewing or anything like that? Seen a sewing pattern? All right, we've got Dakota, we've got Nalani. Because let me show you what a dress pattern looks like. What I'm getting at is we're going into surfacing. Surfacing is also called texturing. But it's when we basically put our skin or whatever on our model. Because remember, we now have the inside bones and muscles and ligatures. And the reason I'm not just saying bones, and this is an important thing about rigging. The reason I'm not just saying, oh, it's putting a, hang on 1 second, I'm gonna mute someone. So, if you could mute yourself, folks, that'd be great. The reason I'm not just saying, oh, rigging is putting bones in, is because it's more than just putting bones in. I don't use any bones to make a smile. You know, there's no lip bone, it's muscles. And rigging means putting that in there too. So it's much more than just putting a skeleton in there. But still, it's still that ugly gray model that we used in previs. Now we have to put the surface on it, and that's surfacing, also known as texturing. So how do we get a surface onto our model? We use something called a surface map. This is a dog. I know it doesn't look like a dog necessarily, but imagine this, if you can see right here. Oh, this is so sad. I'm closing the chat just so I have more room here.
It's like those carpets that they have after they like hunt.
Exactly. That's a really good thing. This is his tongue. And the reason it looks like one of those carpets, because what they do is they take that 3D animal and they take the skin off and lay it flat. And that's exactly, we do the opposite. We start with the flat thing and then we put it onto the actual model. So this right here is for those who haven't seen it, a pattern for a skirt, because it's similar with making clothes. We're taking two-dimensional fabric and trying to make something three-dimensional out of it. Well, it turns out if you cut if you cut out three separate pieces like this, and then you sew them together, and I sew this line here, whoops, to this over here, well, now I've got a 3D skirt. And that's exactly what we do with this. If we put this on top of our model and sew it up along the tummy, this would sort of fit our dog model. Luckily, we don't have to figure out this pattern. Like if you've ever done sewing, there are some people that can just figure it out on their own, but most of us, we buy a pattern. We buy something that looks like this and tells us where to cut. Thankfully, with computer animation, they also do it for us. You'll recognize this as being the creature that we saw being modeled and rigged. And, oh, that's right, it's in Firefox, hang on. You will see here that this is what the computer does for us. He has built the model, so all these polygons, and it creates a surface map for him. So you can see when he zooms in that these are all like connect part A right here with part B over here and wrap it around his leg. And however I decorate this thing, that is what will slide onto him like a sock. But you have a lot of different things to consider. For instance, how scaly, how deep are the scales? How reflective are the scales? Are the scales pliable, or are they hard scales like on an armadillo? And they make lots of choices. Here's more surfacing. You can paint part of the things on the surface map. So all of these little things, if I sewed them together and put it on the computer, and put it onto my model, now I have a structure that is surfaced. Rather, I have a model that is surfaced. And let me just show you, if we look at Luna again, we absolutely 100% do concept art for our surfacing too. Like this is they're thinking about the surface of the model, the asset they build for the light post in Luna. Now we don't have to rig that light post because it is not moving independently, but we still have to surface it. And so do we want this light post to be old? Do we want it to be rusty? Do we want it to be brand new? How shiny should it be? And they basically went in and looked at a bunch of things and came up with, all right, we want it to be combined with this smoothness, but have a little indentations in it and a crack. And this is what the surface for this is going to look like. They also do that with, let's see if I can find a slide, with the actual characters. What do they want the surface to look like for the caterpillar? Well, they had a lot of photos. They want to kind of be modelly like a peach, but also squishy like a gummy bear. And with Luna, moths are actually hairy instead of scaly. So they have the concept art for the surfaces of these characters. So any question on surfacing?
No.
Okay. Because basically what we do next is called compositing. And that basically we take all of our elements, we take our sets, we take our backgrounds. We take our characters, our props, our set decoration. We take the movement of the camera, the movements of our characters, and all of those files and put them together. When they say composite, it means we composite all of our different assets and files and put them together into one nearly finished thing, so that we can see everything that we've done all together.
Sorry,
And-
can you repeat what you said for composite?
Sure, it's when we take all of our assets, so our props, our sets, our backgrounds, our characters, our set decoration, they have been animated, and we put them all together. So we take everything that we've been working on, possibly separately, and put them all together, including our camera moves, any changes in lighting that we've made, our dynamic simulation, and we put it together to see basically how everything works together, our surfaces. And this requires a lot of computer power, which is why when we do things, when you like a feature-length movie type of thing, and we composite shot by shot, so it's still not moved all together. We're still making shot by shot, just like we do with live action. And we look at everything together. Once we realize, yep, this is the way the shot should look. What about you? Yes, this is it. We do something called rendering. And depending on how many files and how big those files are, rendering can take not very long at all, or rendering can take weeks. Major like Pixar and whatnot, they have things called, even smaller companies have what they call render farms. And a render farm is literally a room with a bunch of servers working together. Because taking all those files and putting them together, I have a pretty good computer that I used for high def editing, and it's still really slow when it comes to rendering any sort of computer animation, because you're taking so many files and putting them basically into a 2D video that we can watch on screen. And that can take a long time. And we render shot by shot by shot. And when we're done, we have all of the shots that are in our shot list. And we begin pre-production just like you would with live action. And pre-production is what we're going into in our next class. So compositing is basically the step right before rendering, which is our last step in production. So if I go up here, oops, I'm not screen sharing, zoom, share screen, boom. You can see animating. I'm not going to talk about lighting. This actually, I can say compositing. I don't really need you to worry too much about it. But I do worry that if you ever say like, hey, I learned about computer animation to someone who's doing computer animation, and they're like, wait, she didn't tell you about compositing? That'd be bad. But it's taking all the files and putting them together, and rendering is taking that information and outputting it into a 2D video that we can watch. And it's just like with live action, we do it shot by shot. We don't output the whole film. We do like, okay, these are the shots that we're rendering today. And then we give all those shots to the editor and the people in post-production, and they finish up the film. Okay, do you guys have questions on anything we went over today? What I'm going to do is, because I know taking notes on Zoom is not fun, and also just there's only so long you can look at a computer and Zoom without your brain going crazy. So I am going to post, I'm going to edit this so that privacy things, and then post it so that only you guys can see it. And I am also going to give you some notes to go along with it. The notes won't be as good as the notes you took. And don't forget, if you did take notes, email them to me so I can give you extra credit for it. But I will let you know when that's up, because I know just Zoom sucks. Classes on Zoom, I hate. So I'm putting this extra stuff up there for you guys. Again, sorry about this. Whether, and I said this for the people who came in a little later, whether class is over Zoom on Thursday or in person depends on how I test tonight or tomorrow. I have a feeling we will be in person. I hope so, because it's visual effects, which is one of my favorite classes to teach. But please look at your emails, because I will send you information out, if not tonight, then tomorrow, about where class will be on Thursday. Okay, any questions?
No.
No, I'm good. Thank you, Professor.
All right, thank you guys. Sorry about the COVID.
No
But,
problem.
Hopefully
No worries.
it's done soon. I really tried to be careful. I knew I was getting sloppy.
Are you feeling
right.
okay?
Yeah, I'm feeling good. Thank you, Dakota.
That's good.
For feel better.
Okay.
I didn't get it too bad, and I've had my booster, so it's not bad. It's more of a pain in the ass than anything. All right,
Okay,
guys.
look better,
Talk to you
Professor.
Have a good day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.